This is a brand new flight controller. And BetaFlight 4.4 isn't that brand new, but sometimes you want to put BetaFlight 4.4 on your brand new flight controller. And if you do, sometimes something is missing. It's just the most important thing on the flight controller. Well, pretty much. It's no big deal, right? That's normal. No, that's not normal. That's not normal. Hey everybody, I'm Bacon Ninja, and today we're going to talk about why if you flash 4.4, BetaFlight 4.4, on a flight controller, sometimes it says no gyro found when you're done. You normally have taken the time to find the correct target name, and you pick that target name from the handy dandy little list, and everything should work, and you press the apply custom default buttons after it's done flashing, like a good pilot. You know, you do all the things, but then as soon as you go to the config page, you see the telltale signs that no gyro was found, which is super disappointing because that is literally one of the handful of things a flight controller needs to function, and it will not function without it. But you didn't actually do anything wrong. In fact, it's not really anybody's fault. What's going on here is kind of a multi-layered approach. And to show you that, I'm going to show you this. This is the Darwin 15 amp AIO. This is not the ELRS version. This is just their standard 15 amp AIO. And the product page for this says that the target for this board is Maytec F411 and that it should either have an MPU 6500 gyro or an ICM 20689 gyro, which this one does. This board right here has the MPU 6500. The confusing part though is that it says the target is Maytec. This is a Darwin board. It came in a Darwin box. Why would it say Maytec? Well, that's just the way BetaFlight has been able to unify targets. Instead of having a million targets for every manufacturer, they kind of unify targets around manufacturers that have modeled their boards similarly. And the layout of this board, as far as how the processor's pins connect to things and what things are on it, are supposed to be identical to the Maytec F411. The problem is that this is Darwin, and this is 2023, and you notice that it said that there are two different gyros that may be on this board. One of those gyros is on this board. The problem is, if you dig into Darwin's documentation a little bit further and look at their diagram, it says that this board is actually supposed to have an MPU 6000 on it, and the Maytec F411 target has an MPU 6000 in it. The problem is that this board doesn't have an MPU 6000 on board. This particular one has an MPU 6500. And before BetaFlight 4.4, what BetaFlight was doing was wrapping a bunch of gyro drivers into all of the firmware so that no matter what the vendors did with the gyros, it would essentially just work. Well, that's not the way it works anymore in 4.4 because we have the cloud build flasher where you get to pick a bunch of things and it actually builds your target in real time. So it's based on what the manufacturer told the BetaFlight devs should be on the board. That's what they wrap into it when you make the firmware to flash. And for the Maytec F411, that would be the MPU 6000. And since Maytec really controls that target, they are the ones that make the board everything is based on here, not Darwin. When Darwin decides to change the gyro, then it doesn't get added to the Maytec F411 target. And then we have a problem because no longer are the drivers there for the gyro that's on this board. But like I said, it's not really anybody's fault. The BetaFlight devs are trying to make BetaFlight smaller so that it can fit on other things, more agile, more buildable. It totally makes sense why they would drop the drivers out of support unless it's supposed to be on the board. They shouldn't be packing a bunch of excess crap in there, and that's what they were doing. So they're cutting out the junk. They're cutting out the bloatware. That's a good thing. And when it comes to the manufacturers and the gyros, it's 2023. We change gyros all the time. They're like interchangeable components, and up till BetaFlight 4.4, it really didn't cause a problem because the manufacturer could just clunk whatever they wanted in there, and as long as it's a supported BetaFlight gyro, it would work. But that's not happening in 4.4. And the prices change and availability change, and that's how we get the MPU 6500 on this board that was originally designed with an MPU 6000, and now BetaFlight doesn't wrap the drivers into the firmware for the Maytec F411 target it's based on for the correct gyro. That's just how it works. But BetaFlight did give us a way to get around this, and a couple of other things to help others get around this after we've discovered the problem. And not only is it with the gyro, you might find that you have no gyro, you have no accelerometer, you have no barometer, and Unlikely, but sometimes people don't have an OSD chip either. It's all for the same reasons. The target didn't change, but the manufacturer who's actually making the board did change something about it, and the target hasn't been able to keep up. So today I'm going to show you how to actually get around this, find the right gyro, add your own driver, and flash the thing so that you can get BetaFlight 4.4 on it. But before I do that, I have to remind you, don't put BetaFlight 4.4 on your brand new boards. Don't just get it right out of the box and say, oh, it's new, I need to flash it. It's not like other consumer electronics devices that we get everywhere else, and the first thing we do when it gets out of the box is charge it up, connect it to the internet, and update it. It doesn't work that way with flight controllers. If you don't have a specific reason to go to BetaFlight 4.4, then 4.3 is just fine. If it has an onboard SPI ELRS receiver or something and you want ELRS 3.0, that makes sense to flash to 4.4. If you want really good return to home and all the features that come with 4.4, that makes sense. If it's some kind of flight controller with a weird processor and you want to pack a really small build that only the cloud configurator can give you, then that makes sense. But those are the edge cases where you should flash a brand new flight controller with 4.4. For me, I do it just because I'm curious and I make stupid videos, and sometimes the curiosity and the stupid videos thing line up, and this is one of those times. It's not something that you need to do. If you have reasons to do it, then do it, but make sure you're comfortable with the flashing process of your flight controller before you dive into this. And if you're not, just stay away from it and save yourself a lot of headache until the point at which you absolutely need to, for some reason, flash the flight controller. And then hopefully by then, I'll show you how BetaFlight's handling this to keep up with all the changes happening to gyros and hopefully resolve the issue. But hopefully by then, it'll be all better, but maybe it won't. You'll still have to do this anyway. Anyway, just remember, you don't have to flash a brand new flight controller, but if you want to, let's get down to what it looks like. And the very first step to getting this thing going with a proper working version of BetaFlight 4.4 is to figure out what gyro is actually on it. And at the same time, what we're going to do is we're going to try to help the BetaFlight devs go back into the target and fix it for the next person behind you. Because you found this problem and, in theory, you're not the first person to find this problem, but maybe somebody else did it in Flash 4.4 and just realized, it's not worth it. It doesn't work. I'm not going to work my way through that. And they flash back to 4.3, or they loaded the custom hex file from the manufacturer, which has different defines potentially and has the right driver in it, but the normal unified targets in the configurator don't. So what you're going to do here is find the gyro that's on the board, and then we're also going to go through the steps to report this to the BetaFlight devs so that they can make adjustments to the defines in that target for the next person so that they don't have to do this. So just be a good neighbor and help those behind you. But the first thing we need to do, because the gyro is completely undetectable now, if we went into the CLI and type status, we're not going to see what gyro is on this board. We're going to see probably the gyro it thinks should be on this board, which is totally wrong. What we're going to do is we're going to load a version of BetaFlight that has all of the drivers in it, so that we can run some commands on it and get the actual data to A, provide to the BetaFlight devs for the people behind us, and B, find which things we have to change about BetaFlight to get the right drivers in. So what you're going to want to do is connect it up and go to the Flasher tab, just like you did to flash BetaFlight 4.4 on it. But this time, instead of flashing it the normal way, you will select your target just like you did. You will select your settings just like you did. And you're going to click this thing here that says Core Only. And when you slide that over to Core Only, you'll notice all the other options go away. That's totally normal. What it's doing is giving you the core package of BetaFlight, which includes all of the bloatware drivers, but doesn't include a bunch of features, which are all the things that went away. That's how the Cloud Flasher, the Cloud Build Flasher, is handling adding features, and the core is not going to do that for us. So yeah, you don't want to run this version of BetaFlight, but we need to use this as kind of a safe mode to be able to get the thing to boot and show us the right information. So with the core slider selected, go ahead and hit Load Firmware Online, and then flash it just like you did when you flashed 4.4 and lost your gyro. And now that you got that all flashed up, you're going to want to make sure to hit the Apply Custom Defaults like you should always do after flashing a board with firmware. Apply Custom Defaults so everything's mapped out properly and the MCU can talk to all the things on the board. And then you're going to want to go to the CLI tab. And there's a button in the CLI tab that says submit support data. We're going to want to click the submit support data button, and then it's going to generate a bunch of stuff for us. It's going to pop up a thing first and say, hey, just so you know, what I'm doing here is compiling a bunch of stuff, and then I'm going to load it to the BetaFlight dev server, and then I'm going to give you a code that you can use to put in a support request. That's exactly what this is going to do. So we want to let it do that. And when it's done, at the very bottom, you will have a code. Now, what you're going to want to do is go to the BetaFlight Unified Targets repo and submit an issue inside of GitHub. Yeah, that's where you want to do it. All the devs live there, and that's how they do their issue tracking. It also says you can do it on Discord, but it's best to do an issue in the GitHub like this, and make sure you supply this information to them. And along with that ID, just name your issue something related to the manufacturer, the board model, and the target that you were flashing to it. That hopefully is the correct target because you did your research prior to all this. And then the BetaFlight team will take a look at what the support info dumped out, what is on the board, what should have been on the board based on what's in the target, and then make manipulation changes and all the things so that the person behind you doesn't have this problem. They may add 2 more gyros to the defines so that any variation of the board, no matter the manufacturer that put it together, works. That's the idea. You're fixing this for the next person. But it's not going to fix it for you because they're not going to do that instantly. The BetaFlight devs are people and they have lives, and it's not going to happen immediately. So you can wait this process out till your issue's resolved if you feel like it. Or we can actually just skip ahead now that we've helped the people behind us and take a look at the data in the status items at the top of the support output to see what kind of gyro is actually on this board now that it loads. And if you scroll up to that status section on this board in particular, you can see that the accelerometer and the gyro are listed as the MPU 6500. Which is what I expected, because that's what Darwin's page said. It was either going to be the 6500 or the ICM 20869, whatever that one is, one of the ICM gyros. It was going to be one of those two, even though the target thinks it should have been an MPU 6500. So now that we have that information, we know what gyros should be on here, we can go make a custom defined firmware in the flashing tab for this firmware, for this target with the correct gyro driver. Now, if you have this issue with a barometer, it's kind of the same thing. You can look in here and see what barometer you're supposed to have on board, and then you can go add the same thing I'm going to show you for the gyro. I'll show you where to find all the defines for the barometers and the gyros and the accelerometers, and you can pick the one you need based on your output here, and I'll show you where all to put it. But now that we have this information, let me go show you where you need to put the stuff in the flashing tab to get this done. And back in the flashing tab, if we slide off the core only that we turned on earlier to get our board into safe mode so that we could see what it was doing, you'll notice we get all our options back. All the pull down options are there, and there's a field called custom defines. That's the one we're going to want to manipulate. We're going to put some things in custom defines that define custom attributes of the firmware we would like to build. But in order to get that to work, there's a couple of things that you need to do. First, you have to go up to the very top and you have to enable the show release candidates. And then once you've enabled show release candidates, you have to enable the slider underneath it that says expert mode. Because if you put stuff in this custom defines field and you don't turn expert mode on, even though you hit load firmware online and it goes to the cloud and it builds the firmware, it will actually completely ignore the defines we're going to put in here. And you're just going to have the same problem over and over and over again. And when you flash it, there will still be no gyro or no barometer or no accelerometer found on the thing. So make sure you have show release candidates on and you've got expert mode turned on before you put things in the custom defines. As far as what should go in the custom defines, we can get this list from the BetaFlight Wiki's manufacturer design guidelines. It has all the defines for gyros, accelerometers, barometers, flash chips, all those things that BetaFlight is expecting to be in a target. So the gyro that we found in the support data should be in this list as a define. And what we're going to want to do is take the ones out that we need. You'll need a gyro and accelerometer, or if you're using a BMI gyro, if there's a BMI gyro on, you'll notice there's an option for gyro excel that's kind of both at the same time, but all the other ones have gyro and accelerometer split out. But what we're going to want to do is take it from the word gyro or ACC, copy that, and then put it in the custom defines field, which will look like this. You'll notice we didn't put the word use or the first underscore. We started at gyro or ACC. And now you want to make sure there aren't any spaces before it or after it, but they are separated with spaces. So each item that you put in here is separated by a space. And if your barometer is also missing, you can just scroll down on the manufacturer guidelines page to the defines there, find the barometer that you're supposed to have, and do the same thing and start with the word baro. Just go to the end of where your ACC is, space, and then start with baro and put your barometer in there if you're missing your barometer too. If not, don't worry about it. You've got your gyro and your accelerometer. Those are the things you really need. Your quad will probably fly now, and if you've got the show release candidates and expert mode turned on, it's time to flash the firmware. And the first thing we do is hit the button to build the firmware online or load firmware online. And you'll notice this takes a little bit longer than usual. That's because you're actually telling a server to do it. And it's going to take some resources to do. You're waiting on the server to reply with all the goodies that you just wrapped into your BetaFlight 4.4 distro that you kind of one-offed, which is what's great about this cloud build flasher. We can one-off all of our flashes. We're no longer tied to all the pre-made hex files that exist. We can just kind of do it ourselves. And in the long run, even though this part is painful, where there's no gyro or accelerometer on some boards for some reasons, it's going to be way better to have it this way than it ever was to be tied to all the pre-made hex files. I promise you that is the case. And it's worth all this headache. And eventually the BetaFlight devs will get it all together. And then maybe someday the chip shortage won't make us be changing gyros all the time. I don't know. Maybe someday. Whatever. Don't listen to me. I'm a crazy person. But now that you've loaded your firmware, I like to hit the show log button just so I can take a look at this make line and make sure that the custom define that I put in there is in the line. You'll notice it added a -D and then use underscore in front of the stuff that we typed. That's why we didn't type it there, because it does that for us to make the defines a little bit easier. But if they're in that line in the show log button, then that means your firmware was built with it. So just go ahead and flash it just like you did the first time with BetaFlight 4.4. Like I said, hopefully you're proficient in understanding how the flashing process works. If you had to put your firmware, your flight controller into bootloader mode or whatever it is, that's what you need to do. If you've already flashed it once to find out there was no gyro, then you know how to do this part. That's kind of what I'm banking on here. Anyway, now it's time to flash it. And when you flash it, connect to it, hit the apply custom defaults, and I bet you got a gyro. And if you were missing a barometer, I bet you have a barometer too. There you go. Now you have fixed it yourself and fixed it for the person behind you. And hopefully the BetaFlight devs can get their arms around all these things that no longer line up. I just want to stop for a second and let you know that if this was helpful, it would be helpful to me if you'd give this video a thumbs up and, consider subscribing if you haven't subscribed. Yeah, you don't have to. I understand. I'm a crazy person and you don't have to subscribe to me. And it apparently, like a lot of people on the internet just don't like me. It's okay if you don't like me. That's fine. I appreciate you watching, even if you hate me the whole time. It's whatever. But if you don't hate me so much, I do have a Patreon if you feel like it. And I do have a Buy Me a Coffee if you feel like that. Whatever. You don't have to. I'll keep doing this stupid stuff, even if you don't, just because I enjoy doing this stupid stuff. And if you're not so much a fan of videos and you'd rather read this, I actually have a website that I just launched, and this is going to be a full text article with pictures and walkthroughs and all those things on the website. If you need to reference it, it will be there. So I will put a link in the description below to a few things where you can go to submit your support requests, where you can go to get your custom defines in the BetaFlight wiki, and the article on my webpage in case you just want to roll through it in text. It might be easier for you. I know some people learn better that way. Text article will take a couple more days in the video to come out. So if it's not there yet, just cut me some slack. I'm working on it. It'll be there. I promise it'll be there. But anyway, you have a fully functional flight controller. And like I said, it's not anybody's fault. It's 2023. We can't help but change the chips on these things, the availability, the cost. It's always changing, and they need to be able to still produce flight controllers, and that's the only way to do it. It's also not BetaFlight's fault. The decision they made to do the cloud builds is the right decision long term. It really is. It's just painful right now. So don't get mad at anybody. Let's just work our way through it. Let's help the people behind us make it a little bit easier for them. And that's really it. That's all I got for you. So let me know in the comments below if you flashed BetaFlight 4.4 and found no gyro on your board, and which board it was, and if this has helped you. I really hope it has. And if it did help you, or you already figured it out previously and you didn't support a ticket with, or you didn't enter a ticket with the BetaFlight devs, consider going back and doing that if you don't mind, if it's not too much of a problem, because I think that it's a really, really good of us as pilots to help the other pilots that haven't got there yet or don't know it and they bought a new flight controller to avoid this situation entirely up front. And that's the way we do it. Let's help our neighbors and be friendly, like Ned Flanders on The Simpsons. I haven't watched The Simpsons in a really long time. Is that show any good anymore? Anyway, that's all I got. Until next time, stay greasy. Not catch you later. So the other way to find your gyro in here is to stare at the chip. Stare at it. And with my vision being as bad as it is, I literally have to hold the chip in my eyeball. The gyro is in my eyeball if I want to be able to read it. And then it just says MPU 65, which I know means 6500, but the ICMs are totally weird. Don't do that. But if you have one of those cool desktop microscope thingies, then go to freaking town. That's super awesome. Makes me want to buy one. I'm jealous of you. But if you have good enough vision, you could do that too. Just tell me in the comments below how much better your vision is than mine, because it probably is. It really probably is.